something that you want to eat. But it thrives in disturbed habitats. So it's really common in urban areas. So you'll see it on the edges of fields or vacant lots or on sides of buildings. And it really just takes over native plant communities. So anytime you disturb a habitat, whether that's through construction or logging or recreation, that disturbed habitat opens up an opportunity for this to come in. Alternatives for Japanese honeysuckle, if you want to have something like a vine that climbs and comes back yearly, I'd be really interested to see if you guys have any plants in your backyard like Virginia creeper or wild honeysuckles that aren't invasive like Japanese honeysuckle. So the other one's going to be bush honeysuckle, and they can grow 6 to 15 feet tall, and these are the ones that you're going to see on the sides of highways is where I picture them. Or if you go to any of your local metro parks, if they haven't done a big removal project. And that's what this one is. This is part of a bush honeysuckle. So these shrubs get to be 6 to 15 feet tall. They are absolutely massive. And the way you can tell them apart is really easy in the spring because they're the very first thing that turns green. So when you're driving along the highways, it's winter, it's been gray and gross in Ohio all winter long, and you look off to the side of the highway and you start seeing those green bushes that are just bright green popping out in the early spring, most likely that is honeysuckle. It can completely take over abandoned fields. It can completely take over our woodland areas. I have a nature preserve not too far from my house that I like to go hike to help out in your area. Is look for those honeysuckle removal projects. These honeysuckles will take over that habitat. Like I said, they'll be the first thing you see, and they'll really be the only thing you see in that understory of those woodland areas. And the reason that this is a problem is that it blocks the light and it blocks the resources from other native plant species being able to thrive in those areas. The other one for our area in Ohio that you see pop up first thing in the spring, it's the second thing to bloom right after honeysuckle, are going to be Bradford or Callery pears. So if you picture driving through your neighborhood or driving along the sides of the highway, these are big, classic looking trees that have big white flowers on them. They look like just a puffball exploded on all of the branches. They're absolutely gorgeous and they smell terrible. A lot of people compare their smell to rotting fish. So if that tree rings a bell, sounds familiar in your head, you probably have them in your neighborhood right now. There's a good reason for that. The Callery pear, or also called the Cleveland pear, was actually popularized here in Ohio. It was brought over in the 1800s. Everyone loved it as an ornamental tree, and they took a variety of it that they grew in Cleveland and named it the Tree of the Year and planted it all over Ohio. It was actually named the urban tree for Ohio not too long ago. I think it was 2005. It was named the Urban Tree of the Year. Unfortunately, it can cross-pollinate with any other tree. It doesn't need other trees of its kind, so it spreads like wildfire. So if you plant one in your yard, it's not going to stay in your yard. It's going to go to other yards. It's going to go to the sides of the highways, and it takes over where all of those other trees could be growing. The reason people like them is because they bloom so pretty in the spring, and they bloom really quick and early. So when you're still kind of depressed and sad because it's snowing and gray outside, Callery pear, if you're looking for a tree that blooms early in the spring to plant at your house. That's going to be our eastern redbud, and they are native to our area. It's a great tree to have, and much better for your local habitat. Our native wildlife really enjoy our native plants a lot more than they do our invasive species, so it's a good way to take care of the animals in your yard as well. All right, so now for my yard. In my yard, I just bought this house about 2 months ago, and I was really excited at first in the spring when my backyard turned into a sea of really pretty yellow flowers. I've actually got one right here, so I'll hold it up. Hopefully you can see what that looks like. So this guy is called a fig buttercup or a lesser celandine, and this is what his leaf looks like. And they are a non-native spring ephemeral. So that means that they're one of the first wildflowers to bloom in the spring. And that's the only time you really see them. They live their life in tubers underground, so they're really difficult to get rid of. But they appear in January and stick around until about March or April. So mine are just now starting to fade out, but I'm still going to show you what my yard looks like. The fig part of fig buttercup refers to the shape of those leaves and their underground tubers. And then the buttercup part refers to the flowers. This flower is native to Europe, Northern Africa, Western Asia, and Siberia, and it is believed to have been brought to North America as an ornamental plant in the mid-1800s, and then it escaped on its own and spread to Pennsylvania in the late 1800s. So this is a ground-hugging plant. It kind of grows like a mat. It's difficult to even see the ground around me when I look down at the leaves that are down here. So this is a plant that we're currently working on getting out of our yard. And it looks quite a bit like a native plant that we do have here in Ohio called marsh marigold. They're both spring ephemerals. They're both part of that buttercup family. But lesser celandine is not native and not as good for the local wildlife. So ideally, we'd like to get this out of our yard. So I'm going to tilt down my laptop here. Give me 1 second so you guys can see. I'll show you what that looks like. So everything green on the ground around me is not grass. That is lesser celandine or fig buttercup. So I'm not kidding when I say that my backyard was completely covered in beautiful, beautiful yellow flowers. But unfortunately, they are not native flowers. So we're going to look to get those out so we can put some more native species in. The reason that I don't want them in my yard is because, like we said with the honeysuckle, they block out all the other native ephemerals that are trying to come out. And now that the buttercups have started to fade out, I am getting native species. So this is a dog violet. And these violets are a native spring ephemeral that are here in Ohio. And now that we have started to get the lesser celandine or the fig buttercup out of the yard, the violets are popping up everywhere. So purple leaf strife is an absolutely beautiful flower. It gets to be about 5 feet tall and it grows on the edges of marshes and rivers. And it can kind of erode the bank of the river, so it contributes to erosion of our rivers, but it also blocks out all of the native species that are in the marshy areas for our waterfowl and turtles and things like that. So purple leaf strife was, again, brought over from Europe as an ornamental plant for people to plant in their yards because it's absolutely gorgeous. One flower can actually have 50 stems coming off of it, and then they have long purple spikes of flowers that grow at the top. It can grow in just about any wetland habitat, so marshes, rivers, ditches, meadows, any edge of a water body. And it's really difficult to control. You can pull it out, you can hand dig it out, you can apply herbicide to the entire foliage, but that's not going to be good for any of your native wildlife. So really, it's going to be hard grunt work pulling a page. Good alternatives for purple leaf stripe are going to be spiked blazing star, blue lobelia, and cardinal flower or blue flag iris. So still a bright spring flower that's going to bloom really early, give you that nice pop of color, but not take over an entire habitat or block out native species for right now. So now that we've talked a little bit about all of those plants and why they are negative impacts on our environment, what can you do to help with that? So if we're talking about plants like I am here in my backyard with our fig buttercups, you can do projects on your own while you're self-isolating, hanging out with your family. If you know